Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's Grey Market Blast. It is Wednesday, the 30th of July, all day. You join myself and the amazing Angie Setzer, where Angie will be giving us a rapid fire update of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. I apologise if there's any background noise. Seems like some construction workers have decided to kick off behind me as I started the spaces. But before we crack on, I will get the legals out of the way. Nothing discussed on this spaces session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer. Hello, my love. How are you?
Woohoo! I'm
Woo-hoo.
super. Thanks for
Thanks for
asking.
asking.
It's
God.
Wednesday. And I don't know how it's the end of July. So I'm doing well. Just a little existential crises going on over here a little,
I'm
but we're
I'm a
good.
massive buyer of little for me. I'm having a massive existential crisis.
So it's like, what? Not only am I it's not only July, but it's 2025. So I don't know if any of you are struggling with that either, but here we are halfway through it. So, this morning, you know this, Ryan, he asked me for my bullet points. I said, I don't have any, but we really do. We have lots to talk about, but it's so hard to talk about it because most of it right now is so fluid. It's like trying to catch handfuls of water, right? Like
Yes.
as soon as you grab it, it's gone. But at this point, I'm going to give you just a little update on what I think is going on here as we start the day. And the big thing, trade updates. So tomorrow is the last day to shoot your shot, if you will, if you're trying to influence or put something together with the administration. Remember now, we have a solution put in place for the EU, even if they're mad about it. We have, Japan's come up with their solution again, even if they're mad about it. We have a handful of others. Looks like South Korea is going to try to come in and do the same thing that you saw Japan and the EU do. Apparently India, did not, follow through on what they thought they were going to do because we did get notice this morning, that, basically he's done trying to negotiate there had been, kind of some signs this might be coming, simply because there was a little bit of pushback here or there. Everyone had kind of said we'd have something in place by the first part of June, then, the first part of July, then the first part of August, and then like yesterday it was like October. And so I think you kind of knew to a certain extent, like I'm not going to say I called this yesterday because I didn't. But it felt like it was coming where Trump's like, all right, that's it. Foot is coming down would be kind of how my dad would have put it when I was in high school. But the other thing too, that is of most interesting that they are saying that they're going to put a 25% tariff on India. But then a penalty for the above. He's talking about their imports of Russian energy. This is from his, President Trump's Truth Social post here this morning. They have the most of strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country, talking about India. But they've also bought a vast majority of their military equipment from Russia and are Russia's largest buyer of energy. Along with China, he mentions, at a time when everyone wants Russia to stop killing in Ukraine. And so basically he says they're going to get a 25% tariff plus a penalty for the above. And so that's the big question right now because President Trump did say yesterday too, that this Russian secondary sanctions deadline on, countries that are importing Russian oil. It's just specifically oil. There was some confusion. There were a few headlines that went out that was like, oh my God, what happens if they, secondary tariff, fertilizer and some of these other things? But it looks like at this point it's just going to be the oil. That's going to impact India and China, directly. And so the question, of course, comes back to, what is Russia's response to this? First off, because it's not only the tariff part, you're also going to see an increase likely in the flow of weapons from the U.S. to Ukraine, or at least that's been the threat. But how does China also react to this if we do see these secondary sanctions where we are tariffing, and how does that influence what it is that we're trying to accomplish with them? So all of these little butterfly effects that we're just really enjoying, along the way. And then you also have the unknowns of your sectoral tariffs, there's pharmaceuticals still coming out. There's semiconductors still coming out. Which is of interest just simply because we're still working to negotiate these trade deals. And at the same time, we're still rolling out new tariffs. Just a few things kind of that watching as well. There is a court case, I think today, right? Have you seen anything on that? Isn't there did I ask you, did I catch you off guard on that one?
Yeah, which court case is this?
I thought there was something, I don't even want to, like, how they asked me to be the expert, but I think there was something about the tariffs again, like it was going into
Oh,
remember the
yes, one of these,
secondary?
as yes, does Trump have the authority to
Yes.
do? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I know what you're on about, but again, there's just been so many moving parts. It's been
Hmm.
so hard to keep track
That's
of
what I
stuff at the
said. Like,
moment.
is this a new one or is this a continuation of the old one or is this a whatever? And does it really matter? Probably not, because the administration has spent hours upon hours figuring out how to work around all of these little things. There's a lot of talk about the Brazil tariff too. You did see Brazil's beef industry come out. One of the little fun facts out there that not a lot of folks know. The U.S. imports a lot of lean beef from Brazil to kind of blend into its ground beef supply. And so Brazil's beef industry had anticipated almost doubling their beef exports into the U.S. this year. They're now saying that if we do follow through on these tariffs, you're basically looking at a 76% tariff charge on Brazil beef imports into the U.S. They think that's going to cost their industry $1 billion. And so that'll be interesting to watch. There's a lot of different little moving pieces along the way, like I said, and as soon as you feel like you know what's going on, it's just going to change anyway. Not to be dystopian in that regard, just, I'm accepting it. I'm learning how. I've made it through.
Just on this point, I've got a lot of sympathy for analysts, like especially people like you that are trying to put out content for subscribers and clients. When you're writing a page of A4 about what's happening today in the market, there's every chance halfway through you writing it, it's all changed anyway.
Well, that's why I've switched to video. Subscribers will know that. Like, I just do a video update during the day. So now I have Twitter up. I can absolutely just update it as soon as I'm putting it out. But that's truly why I was finding that I went from spending an hour in writing, just writing the content, to it's almost getting to 2 to 3, just simply because you don't want to put out garbage. You don't want to put out something that's inaccurate. And like, as things change, it's hard. Anyway, so fast forward over to the grain flow side of things. Kind of on that Russia subject with the Russian deadline kicked ahead, how does an escalation influence Black Sea movement? You've seen a lot of different things happening out of Russia. Like, we've been waiting to see out of Ukraine, just out of the Black Sea in general. Lots of talk of harvest delays. A lot of that's being driven likely by weather. But there's also some logistical things. There's been, rail bridges damaged. Russia has used obviously uses rail to move goods, not only, grains and things, but they also, Ukraine says that it's military. And so there's been bridges blown up. There's been tracks, kind of destroyed. It's just been a little bit more in the way of difficulty, getting grain from the interior to the exterior and moving it out of ports. There's also, obviously a lot of confusion over export taxes, over, businesses, different, grain businesses and the control of the government and things like that. And so that's one of the things that I'm watching. Is you did see, we have seen some analysts kind of bump up their export outlook for Russia. But at this point in time, if I were a grain buyer, if I were a merchandiser sitting an end user that needed supply, because remember at this point too, we've gone so back to hand to mouth so much that you really don't have time for a disruption. Do you buy from Russia or do you buy from somewhere else that you can get it, pay a tiny bit of premium? So we'll be watching what the cash market does out of the Black Sea. Ukraine also is having a hard time getting, grain exports moving, not necessarily because, of blockades or port issues or whatever, but like, just again, logistics, movement in general, and like the likelihood of a reduced crop size. And so that's all stuff that we'll be paying attention to, here as we move ahead. And if you do see an escalation, like, how does Putin respond to this 10 days, this ultimatum? And what does Trump do? Like, we've seen it with Iran. We've seen, there's just, it's like, you don't know right now what happens next. And so that'll be something that'll, be super interesting to me. We did see the U.S. win another round of corn tender business. We basically saw the flat price paid for these bushels bought. And that's easy for me to think, but not say, but the flat price paid. So basically your cash price paid, kind of sat right around what has been the recent low over the last couple of weeks. You did see a buyer I think last week, reject a tender because the price had gone up a bit. It was probably 2 weeks ago. We saw them reject a tender, or at least leave a tender without making a purchase. And so the prices have bottomed back out, right in that flat price area that they've been sitting at for a while, out of the US, out of everywhere. But basis is stronger. So again, one of those things that you tend to pay attention to is if futures continue to fall, but your cash price stays the same or starts to move higher, that's a sign that the market isn't necessarily meeting its demand. And so that's something that we'll be paying attention to. It is interesting to note that Brazil should be absolutely eating our lunch right now when it comes to purchasing values and exporting into the global market. And they're not. We're still gaining business as we move forward. We're still a lot cheaper than Brazil. And that's going to have some really interesting implications on, not only later in the marketing year, like what does this look like for Brazilian corn exports January through April or May of next year or whatever, but also here in the fourth quarter of the calendar year, because that is traditionally our soybean movement time. Which leads me to the next thing. Everyone freaking out about the soybean export book. I feel like it's deja vu all over again. We've all forgotten that a year ago we were doing the exact same damn thing. It would be different if China had come in and bought all of their October, November, and December needs already from Argentina or Brazil. I could see why we'd have our panties wadded and we'd be all worried. But they haven't. And you're still seeing positive crush margins. You're still seeing it to where they're probably going to look this direction. I fully believe that to a certain extent, the government there wants to have more control, over the grain movement or the flow of grain. And so you could see, more in the way of the reserve purchases being made here in the short term, the reserve, the government selling into the private crushers and some of these other things, or at the very least, yes, there's tariffs in place, but the government has the power to remove that loophole or add in a loophole, give them a loophole. That makes sense. I don't know if you can hear the dogs barking.
I follow you. I follow.
Can you hear the dogs barking in the background? I have no idea what they're barking about, but if you can, I apologize. I do not live at a dog pound. I just have a handful of stupid dogs. Anyway, so it's one of those things we'll be paying attention to, is just really kind of how this new crop export book matures. We should start to see more in the way of business. But of course, with all of this uncertainty between China and US, we haven't heard Trump confirm the 90-day extension yet. You know what I mean? And so I think until that happens, you're not going to see a big purchase or sort of a change in that whole market structure. Lastly, it's Fed Day. Woohoo! Are you ready for Fed Day, Ryan? What are you wearing?
Born ready. Ready. I think it's going to be, it's going to be a snooze fest. We know, they're not going to be cutting. The market will be extremely shocked if they do cut. The statement is going to be probably, we know kind of what the statement's going to be. I would say the only bit that's going to be of any interest are the first 5 questions.
That's what I'm waiting for. I want to hear what Powell, how he's going to talk about, right? Like,
yeah, and also just his tone, because we know that he's going to be asked about his relationship with Trump and stuff like that. It's just, literally, that's all I'll be tuning in for.
Oh, yeah. I want to hear what he has to say, if he makes more pointed comments about tariffs or not, because we are starting to see now, where you saw kind of an article circulating or a headline circulating here this morning, that these companies are starting to complain that they're getting hit, that they're getting pinched by these tariffs. And so, it'll be interesting to see, cause a lot of them had said, oh yeah, we'll eat the tariffs during the negotiations. We'll do what we got to do. We're true, red, white, and blue Americans here, and we'll do what we got to until things get done. And I think a lot of them had thought that you weren't going to see a continuation of 25 or, 25% plus or 15% plus, depending or whatever. Like, sorry, phone call. But I don't think they were expecting to see these types of tariff rates remain in place. And so it is going to start to pinch their bottom line. And when it comes down to it, they are beholden, and maybe that's not the proper term, so don't take offense to it if that does make you angry that I say that. But, their job is to return on investment for their stockholders and investors and things like that. And so it's only for so long that you can eat 15% of additional costs before you have to pass it on to the consumer. That in and of itself is inflationary, I believe. I'm an English major, not an economist. But how does Powell kind of respond to that? Does he say anything about it? Is there a more pointed conversation about, hey, the likelihood of seeing some inflationary causes from this? Like I just said, we import a significant amount of lean beef from Brazil to blend into our ground beef supply. We're going to increase the cost of that by 76%. Or, up to an additional 76% when it's already the most expensive it has been, and that's not a comment on beef or anything like that. It's just simply, it does impact the customer because the supply gets more costly. And so it'll be interesting just to see if what Powell has to say about that. And if he had, what, like you said, what is his response to the pressure that he's been given to kind of leave? And so otherwise, we'll just be watching. I am starting to see more folks kind of be like, maybe we got a little excited about our crop estimates a little too early, which it happens to everyone. It's totally fine. But I think we may have, we're starting to see, more folks talk about the Iowa crop, potentially going backwards in places because of the heavy rainfall that you're seeing and the continuation of heavy rainfall. Cool and wet is not the greatest thing. It tends to really help influence, just super wet after a while. You just end up having more in the way of disease and things like that. Like the old adage in agriculture is a dry year will scare you, a wet year will kill you. And so that's one of those things we have to really pay attention to or be cognizant of at this point is just kind of I'm starting to see a little bit of a shift in sentiment from folks that were very, very adamant, as recently as a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that, this thing was creeping towards a 190. And so we'll be paying attention to that, see what happens. But as we start today, we got wheat down about a penny. We got beans down about a nickel. Corn's trading both sides of unchanged. I'm excited to see how people twist the India lack of deal as being bearish, even though we weren't expecting a deal before. Like everything just gets a nice little bearish twist these days. So looking forward to that one. But beyond that, it's Wednesday.
Awesome. Angie, thank you so much, as always, for being an absolute star. Listeners, thank you so much as well for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. As Angie said, watching now the market, see what happens tonight or this evening for us in the UK with Powell. And whatever you're doing, stay safe, keep it tight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Woohoo! Have a good one.